Riveting history of reality TV.
Why'd you do it?
I did it because Tom and I had this connection. I felt seen and heard by him, and I hadn't
Not by me? Didn't feel seen or heard by me?
No, actually, well, if I'm going to be
I've
honest,
been there for you since James was being mean to you when you guys were together.
I know, that's
And I was
true.
the only person who
That's
saw
true,
or heard
that's
you
true.
then. Like,
I
you're
know I am.
soul-sucking individual.
You're completely right.
And I will, after today, never see or speak to you again, and I will be better for it.
Do you remember this
Why
whole
couldn't
boy,
thing?
that sounds like
Scandival?
fun.
Do you remember this whole
Yeah.
thing? That controversy was something people could not stop talking about last summer from Vanderpump Rules. Comes from a long line of reality TV shows, from the early days of Candid Camera to The Gong Show in the 70s to Survivor, Big Brother, Bachelor.
Yeah.
It's a genre that has changed American entertainment.
The new book, Cue the Sun, The Invention of Reality TV, explores its evolution. Author Emily Nussbaum is a staff writer for The New Yorker and joins us this morning. Good morning.
Hello. Hi.
Well, you think about Candid Camera, and I totally forgot you could consider that as reality TV, and that was hilarious, but it seems like the reality TV that we knew is much more manufactured, is it not? Are there various versions or levels of manufactured realism?
Yes, there definitely are. This book is actually the origin story of reality television. So it starts not only before Candid Camera, it starts with Candid Microphone, which was the radio show that it started out with. And it runs through many decades through 2009. So it's about the initial invention of these shows, a set of experiments. I did more than 300 interviews for it. It's a nonfiction account of how we got where we are. So it doesn't run up to Scandival, but it actually traces the period when a lot of these really were documentary experiments. And the point where the book ends is actually where what people in the industry call soft scripting begins, which is what you're talking about, which is a more contrived kind of artificial version of reality TV. But the weird point I make in the book is the faker a show is, the more ethical it is. Because a lot of this is about these morally complex shows in which people are put under pressure to try to squeeze out something authentic.
You know, I'm thinking about Survivor, what a big deal that was in the beginning. And I think you go into how someone came up with that idea. But I'm always curious, that first season, no one knew how to get alliances. And that it's like the whole show changed so much because people know how to play this game. Talk about Survivor.
Well, yes, that's absolutely true. When people were on the first season of Survivor in the United States, there was a real innocence to the cast. I remember talking to several cast members who talked about having conversations like, are we allowed to lie on screen? Like, who's supposed to be the winner? Is it the best person? Can you even form an alliance? A lot of this book is about these first seasons, and I think that there's something very touching about the naivety of people doing those shows. But one person on that show obviously didn't feel that way, and that was Richard Hatch, who completely understood that you could lie and you could form alliances. And part of what I trace in this book is the creation of something else, which is the reality television star. And there are a few people who were preternaturally knowledgeable about what it meant to be on TV and to use your own charisma to become a kind of character to the world.
But you mentioned the word ethics, and I wouldn't think reality show producers would care much about that. So why is that even important?
Well, I mean, yes, some reality television producers don't care very much about ethics. In a lot of ways, this book is about the creation of a genre and art form that's very influential. It's also about the creation of a workplace and a set of jobs that didn't exist before. And I talked to dozens of reality producers about their jobs, and they have very different feelings about it. A lot of their job is about manipulation. The same is true of editors. But it's complex because these shows are very much about a relationship between people on both sides of the camera. And what you see on the show is the residue of that relationship. You just don't see the part. So I'm trying to illuminate this, both for people who don't like the genre and for people who care a lot about it. I think they should understand how these shows are made. And I don't want to sum it up as any one thing, because the truth is, in some cases, there really was an attempt to capture something real about the world. But the truth is, the power is always on the side of the producer. And especially, I have to say, in the chapter on The Bachelor and dating shows, there are some pretty ugly techniques that are used to get people to cry, to be heartbroken, to act out, to get the kind of drama that gets turned into a soap opera on screen.
Give me an example. I mean, The Bachelor, you said there was a lot of sexism involved in that. The show is, give me an idea of what you heard from producers on that one especially.
Well, I think that there's something specifically about dating shows that causes them to be aggressively manipulative. And actually, I talked to a lot of reality producers who said they would do torture shows and shark shows, all sorts of things, but they didn't like dating shows. I mean, a lot of this is about the very straightforward fact that the producers feel to the cast members like friends or therapists. They're within a bubble of intensity on the show. I mean, there are a bunch of different techniques. One producer, the wonderful Sarah Gertrude Shapiro, who made a fantastic scripted show called Unreal, she talked to me about essentially going to a girl and saying, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but he's going to choose you. So you should get dressed up, knowing that he wouldn't, because it was designed to reap heartbreak. The thing is, that's one version of this. There's another thing that's like the Frankenbite, which is a sort of deceptive edit. These things are normal, especially in a lot of contemporary reality shows. But because reality contestants sign contracts with severe NDAs, they're not really allowed to talk about that. So part of the point of this book is to illuminate exactly what goes on behind the scenes so that people can really understand what this is. That's the example that I would choose from The Bachelor. But the nature of these shows is about basically squeezing something out of the people who are on the show.
Well, it's fascinating. The book is Cue the Sun, The Invention of Reality TV. We didn't even get to talk about Real Housewives. There's so many shows, Larry.
Oh, what a shame.
Oh, anyway, you can get more at Emily's website. Follow her on social media. It's fascinating. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Sure.